What if I told you that being underestimated is not always a bad thing and it can actually be a blessing in disguise? And maybe you're listening to this and you're like, what the hell? And I know a lot of the time as women, we are underestimated, we're stereotyped, we're thought to be one thing when we're actually another. But when people underestimate you, that puts you in a position of power because you know how they perceive you, you know what they're looking for, and you know how to prove them wrong because they've already made their expectations known. Because the person who underestimates you is unwillingly surrendering way more information than they actually even realize. And what they also don't realize is that within that information is the answer on exactly how to how to prove them wrong. So I'm going to tell you a quote and keep this in mind for the next 25 or so minutes while we're together. The truth is generally seen, rarely heard. And while you think about that, I am going to cue up the theme song. Let's go. We got a lot to talk about. So before we get into anything else, you may have been wondering why I am wearing a fur coat. And the answer to that is quite simple. It's that I wanted to, and I'm serving, so here we are. And this is actually not fur, this is pure plastic. So if I were to go near a candle or something, I would burst into flame. All right, so this law is loosely based on Law 9 Law 9, okay, sorry. Law 9 from the 48 Laws of Power, not Law 9 from the Girly Laws of Power. And Law 9 in the 48 Laws of Power is win through your actions, never through argument. So that is the basis of this law, although it takes a turn, but that is the basis of this law, which is you cannot win through words. Okay, only your actions can do the speaking for you. That's why arguing is so useless. Like, have you ever actually gotten into an argument with somebody and come out of that where one party proved their point and the other party was like, okay, great, I see where they're coming from, I'm gonna let them have this one? No. That's why today's law is difficult, because it calls into question a lot of the behaviors that have been ingrained in us throughout our lives. Like the notion that we have to stand our ground. We have to prove people wrong. We have to give people a piece of our mind if they contradict us. We have to talk sense into people. These are all behaviors of self-absorbed idiots. I'm sorry, they are, because they're based on this misguided belief that each person is the center of the universe. We see everything through our own lens, our own perspective, and we rarely stop and try to step into somebody else's shoes, right? That requires an element of empathy and of putting our ego aside. And I know we're women, but we also have egos. A lot of the time, we're probably thinking, I'm right. Therefore, if somebody has beliefs that contradict mine, they must be wrong. That's a lot of the time how we go into arguments and discussions and meetings and even probably regular conversations. And that is the fool's way of doing these things. And that's why nobody wins, right? Because if every person is thinking that, which 99% of people are, then it is impossible to come to an agreement through words, through discussions, because everybody's already come into that discussion thinking that they're right and thinking that they have to prove the other person wrong. And this self-absorption, because that's what it is self-absorption, it makes us oblivious to the fact that every time we interact with someone, we are entering their world where they think they're the center of the universe. It's like going into somebody else's house. You don't go into someone's house thinking you're the host or you're the homeowner. So why do we go into interactions and conversations with people with that same mindset? Another thing is that everyone thinks they're smart, and the thought of being intellectually inferior to someone is absolutely unbearable to most people, because intelligence is seen as something that we're born with. So if you're dumb, you're basically cursed for life. And I talk a lot about this in Law 8. This is actually the basis of Law 8, which is to act dumb to get what you want. By arguing with somebody, especially if they think they're superior to you, you're calling their intelligence into question. It doesn't actually matter if they are superior to you. They just have to think that they are. So if somebody, like especially a guy, if he has some kind of superiority complex, he thinks he's better than you. If you argue with him, that's like a double crime. That's a double whammy because you're insulting someone's intelligence and you are insulting their perceived superiority to you. And that is an unspeakable crime, which is a new term that I'm coining, unspeakable crime. I'm actually going to start a glossary of terms because I just keep making up terms that I love. My favorite term right now is the victim Olympics or the suffering Olympics, which is when people try to compete for who is the most stressed, tired, victimized, blah, blah, blah. And I've gotten a bunch of people, like a lot of my friends, using this term. So it's like fetch. Fetch is going to happen, just like Gretchen made fetch happen. Did she? I don't remember. But I am going to make victim or suffering Olympics happen. But yeah, I'm making a glossary. I'm going to put it on my website because I love them. Okay. Anyways, where were we? Where's my train of thought? The Hogwarts Express is my train of thought. All right. So proving, this is where we were. Proving people wrong through words is useless. And not only is it useless, but it's also obnoxious because it's a direct contradiction of people's beliefs, of their intelligence. This is directly from the 48 Laws of Power. Any victory that you have through an argument is short term. In the long term, resentment will replace that temporary victory. And it might even have the opposite effect. Maybe you argue with somebody and they come out of their argument, they're like, oh, okay, you know what? Maybe they had a point. Maybe she's right. And then they let the dust settle. They let their emotions settle. And then the next day they're like, wait, I don't think she was right. This is dumb. Now I'm double mad. And a resentment builds up within them. So there's no such thing as winning an argument. So what I've just described are the self-absorbed idiots who like to argue with their words and get nowhere. Okay. Now, if the idiots are self-absorbed, clever people are empathetic and subtle because the art is in proving people wrong indirectly. If there's one thing you should take away from this podcast and from me talking to you every single week, it is the art of subtlety. Because as a woman, you've been gifted with the ability to be subtle, to be clever, to scheme a little bit. So why are we going to go around being loud and obnoxious and arguing like men? Because men don't have that gift of subtlety. So all they can resort to is fighting like monkeys and apes and beating their chest and yelling about who's right and who's wrong. But we don't have to do that. I mean, we're a lot hotter than them, but also like we have subtlety. Let's talk about actually putting this law into action. Now, the trick is playing into the stereotypes just enough to lower people's defenses. Because when somebody sees you as weaker or dumber than them, they're not going to see you as a threat. That's why acting dumb a lot of the time is such a great strategy because that person doesn't see you as a threat. You position yourself as someone who's harmless and innocent, and then you can gain that person's trust. And then once they trust you, you get them to overshare information that you can use to prove them wrong and to get ahead and to meet your own goals. So the easiest way to show this law in action is to share an example. So let's talk about Tom. Who is Tom, you might ask? He is our new manager that our office just hired, and he's a little bit sexist, and he thinks that you're not as capable as your male colleagues, okay? So what would a self-absorbed idiot do? To be honest, Tom seems like a jerk, so my respect for him is limited. An idiot would outright try to prove Tom wrong, the idiot might go straight to HR and complain. But remember, HR is not your friend either. So what's really going to come out of that? Probably nothing or more problems. Sorry to any of the HR girlies who are listening to this right now. Or a self-absorbed idiot might even try to remove themselves from the situation and maybe try to work with another manager, which remember, in the corporate world or in the world of the workplace, nobody is really your friend. So you go to another manager who you might trust and say, hey, like, I'm having issues with Tom. Can I work with you instead? And then word spreads back to Tom, and now Tom is annoyed and he's going to treat you double as worse. Grammar is not on point right now, but you know what I mean. So all these examples to say, and I'm just making these up on the spot, but all these examples to say a self-absorbed idiot would just be like, oh my God, this is stupid. I don't want to work with this guy, and do something that's going to shoot herself in the foot and result in probably more difficulties down the road with this guy. Now, a clever woman would ask Tom to be her mentor. Because Tom thinks lesser of you for being a woman, his guard is already probably down. And if you play into the stereotype that he is more intelligent than you or that he's better at the job than you are, he's going to feel super smart and important in your presence. His ego is going to be inflated. And then what does he do? He's going to trust you because your presence makes him feel good about himself. And that's when you get Tom to blab. You know, maybe you set up a weekly or a bi-weekly coaching call with him so that he can share some skills and some tips with you so you can improve your work as whatever your job position is. Do you think he's actually going to sit down with a male colleague and share this stuff? Hell no, because that's his competition. If your male counterpart knows too much, then in Tom's mind, he's going to go after Tom's job. But he doesn't see you as a threat. So you're able to get this wealth of information from him for free without him seeing you as a threat. You might even get him to rat himself out. Maybe one day you're having like a coaching chat with him and he's telling you about a previous project that he did with a client. And he talks about how, oh, you know, this client, I gave them a little $100 gift card to a steakhouse. And yep, let's say I want that account. I don't know why Tom sounds like Santa Claus, but there you go. Now he just told you about how he bribed a client. Now you have dirt on him. Not that you're going to go around blackmailing people, but I'm just saying that his defenses are so lowered that not only is he giving you actual advice that may or may not be useful, who knows, maybe he's actually really good at his job, but he's also giving you things that put you in a position of greater power because now you know too much. So let's take a step back. This clever woman, she has asked Tom to be her mentor. She's had regular meetings with Tom for him to coach and mentor her and for him to blab about his experiences, his skills, some dirt, all that sort of stuff. Now, what do? You implement Tom's advice, or you pretend to implement his advice, and then you go ahead and highlight your achievements or your success in implementing that advice that he gave you. So let's say that Tom told you a story about how he did X and Y. You can go to Tom after you've implemented X and Y or pretended to, and you tell him, in the pitch call with company ABC, I did X and Y like you did, and I even threw in Z, which is the thing that you actually did, and they were so impressed that they decided to work with us. We got the account. Now, Tom is impressed because you're mirroring him. You did X and Y just like he did, and you threw in your own twist, which is Z. And maybe Z is the only thing that you did because X and Y were actually garbage advice, but you pretended to follow it anyway. Now, Tom is probably thinking, I was wrong about her. She's actually very good at her job. She's even better than Bill. Bill is your male counterpart. So this is just one example, but the principle is the same for most situations, which is to slightly lean into the way that you're being underestimated, get people to bring their guard down, build a relationship, gather information, and then watch how people who underestimated you willingly admit that they were wrong, which is something that never, ever would have happened through an argument. It wouldn't have happened through you asking to work with another manager or going to HR or any of that. And that's the thing, you didn't talk sense into someone. You showed them what good sense looks like and how they were lacking it. And you did that entirely through your actions. Because remember, arguing is just short term. You might, if at all, you might get a short term victory, but that is quickly replaced by resentment and anger and other emotions that are just going to make not only your argument completely futile, but is actually going to be counterproductive to you. Like I said earlier, when people underestimate you, that puts you in a position of power, because by underestimating you, that person is unknowingly giving you the exact tools you need to control the narrative and to prove them wrong, because they've already laid all their cards out on the table and you already know what it's going to take to prove them wrong. And you can gradually do that. And when I say gradually, I do mean gradually, right? It's like showing a little bit of leg, because we are graced with subtlety, the art of subtlety, with a little bit of patience, with a little bit of cleverness. And so we can make these investments like we did with Tom, and it might take a few weeks, it might take a couple of months, but if you're going to be working with this buffoon for several months or several years, then those investments, those time investments seem trivial in comparison. Remember what I said, the quote that I shared: the truth is generally seen, rarely heard. So we all need to just, a lot of us, we need to shut up and figure out a way to act, to show people that they were lacking sense rather than talking sense into someone. Hey everyone, it's Editing Neeki. I'm back. I feel like you guys have been hearing a lot from me lately in my last few episodes. As I was editing this episode, I realized that the examples I give here are different from the ones that I normally give in my other episodes, because these were more hypothetical examples, and I normally give examples of people, like real life examples of people who've implemented the laws that I'm talking about. I just wanted to mention that these examples that I'm giving are based on actual things that I've done in my corporate job, which if you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that I actually quit my job a few weeks ago to become a full-time baddest bitch in the building. And because it's very recent, I still want to draw examples from my experience in the corporate world, because like, let me tell y'all, I had an experience, and I've got so many examples to share with you all from things that I've learned. In this episode specifically, I'm drawing on examples that I've actually used, but I made them hypothetical because like not a lot of time has passed between me being in my job and me releasing this episode, so I kind of wanted to keep it a little bit more broad. But as time goes by, I'm going to obviously draw on very specific examples and draw from my experience in the corporate world, because I feel like there's just so much to share. And honestly, while I'm here, I'll actually give you another example, and I'm going to make this one a little bit more specific because I feel like this one I can share. I worked with a project manager who was a little bit of a difficult person to work with, and he definitely underestimated me, especially with the quantitative work that I had to do. And although I'd proven myself to other project managers I had worked with, and like proven my quantitative skills to them and showed that I'm quite capable, this person, he just wasn't having it. As a strategy to get him to soften up and like me more, not in a pick me way of, oh, love me, choose me, pick me, but in a way of him like liking me enough to respect me as a colleague, I decided to mirror his behavior. Mirroring is such an important thing to do. When you mirror someone's body language, when you especially mirror someone's words and repeat their words back to them, it has a hypnotic effect, because psychologically people like to see their words, their actions, their body language reflected in the people they're interacting with. So I used mirroring as a tactic to disarm him and to get him to soften up. And I noticed there was one particular behavior that he really loved doing, which was at the end of every meeting, he would repeat back the key points that you told him and summarize the takeaways of the meeting and the action items coming out of that meeting. Even in casual conversations, he would still do that at the end. He would still recap and repeat back to you what you said. So I noticed that, and I started doing that every single time I had a meeting or a conversation with him, formal or informal. And he loved it. He ate it up. And in my performance review, he literally wrote that as a comment of something that he appreciated that I did. That is an example of how mirroring can also be used as a tactic in this law. All right, that is it. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming. So let's talk about some reversals to this law. Now, maybe you're thinking this mindset is holding women back. No, first of all, no. What's holding women back is fighting injustice like a man. Being loud and obnoxious and trying to prove people wrong is the masculine way of fighting. If you were to deal with Tom like a man, that would have been so counterproductive to what you were trying to do that it would have created a bigger problem than if you were to just do nothing. And also remember that when you act like a man, men start to see you as competition. And that is the exact opposite of what you want to be perceived as. You want to be perceived as complimenting them, not competing with them. Because when you compliment, that's when you, first of all, have a nice harmonious relationship so you can actually function well and get along, but it also helps you get what you want. If anything, being loud and obnoxious is probably just going to get you labeled as something else, like emotional or unstable, or it might even draw on other labels that society has already put on people. For example, the label of the angry Black woman. So imagine not just being labeled as the weaker sex, but then being labeled as something else on top of that. Again, counterproductive. And what you need to realize is we are not leaning into stereotypes to confirm them. We're doing it to undermine them. And we're doing it in a clever, subtle, strategic way that works in harmony with human nature. Because people want to feel like they're smart. People want to feel like they're in control. People want to feel like they are the center of their own universe and that they are right. And if you think that arguing and fighting for things through argument and being loud and obnoxious is effective, go watch a political debate. Go. I dare you. Now, another reversal is that not all people are worth using this law on. If you're working with someone with some misogynistic tendencies, sure. And it sucks that we have to work with people like this, but that's when being clever and strategic is more important than ever, because we want to make these investments in ourselves so that we can create a work environment for ourselves that isn't terrible and toxic. So with somebody who has like some misogynistic tendencies, sure, because they can still be whipped into shape. But if it's a full-blown woman hater who's literally impossible to work with, then maybe you need to make that call of whether you're in a toxic environment that you need to leave, because not all people are gonna, entertain you. If it's a full-blown misogynist and you go and ask him to be your mentor, for example, he's probably going to turn you down. So you need to make that judgment call based on your own knowledge and experience of being around these people, whether it will be beneficial to you and a good use of your time to use this law and to try to lean into that stereotype and then gradually prove them wrong, or if you just need to remove yourself from the situation altogether, because this is not even a person who's worth putting any effort into, because it's literally never going to change. Okay, you know your targets better than I do, so I'm here to guide you through it, but you're here to make those judgment calls on who to use it on and who is just who needs to go to the curb. Okay, so thank you everyone for tuning into this episode. Let me know your thoughts on this one. I feel like this was a little bit more controversial, maybe a little bit more clever, but I really enjoyed putting this together, and I've definitely used this. I mean, I'm somebody who I compete in the sport of powerlifting, which at one point used to be a very male dominated sport. There's a lot of women in it now. I think it's close to being evenly split, but I was in a lot of environments where it was super male dominated, and I was like under a spotlight because I was the only girl there. and I would walk into a gym and people would think that I'm going to go and do like dumbbell curls with like a pink dumbbell or something. And then I would go and bench more than them and they would be like, oh. So listen, I've been there. I continue to be there sometimes. And just use the gift that your X chromosomes have given you, okay? Which is the art of subtlety and using your femininity as a tool, a complementary tool to get what you want out of the world, because we have all the tools. We already have all these tools. We just need to figure out how to use them. And that's why I'm here. Anyway, if you want to get in touch with me, you know where to find me. Everything is in the show notes. And if you liked this episode or this podcast, or you like my fur coat, it never hurts to give a 5-star rating or to like or comment or subscribe or whatever you want to do. So do that if you want. You don't have to. And just don't forget that you are the baddest bitch in any building that you step foot in. All right, until next time, stay bad. Love you. Bye.